Jose Antonio Navarro was born on February 27, 1795, to Josefa Maria Ruiz y Peña and Angel Navarro. He was born into a distinguished noble family at San Antonio in the Viceroyalty of New Spain. His mother was an aristocrat of a noble Spanish family, and his father was a self-made man who made himself into a successful merchant and the alcalde of San Antonio. At an early age, Navarro began to take an interest in law, including the laws of Mexico and Spain. However, his early education was rudimentary, and he often self-educated himself. During the 1810s, San Antonio was a hotbed of revolution against Spanish rule and was a scene of bloody clashes between the Spanish army and Mexican rebels. Navarro began to take an interest in the revolutionary fervor at the age of 17, when he supported and took part in the 1812-1813 Gutierrez-Magee expedition. The purpose of the expedition was to free Texas from Spanish rule. However, after a year of fighting, the expedition would end in failure. As a result, the Spanish army would take brutal reprisals upon the people of San Antonio, executing hundreds of rebel supporters. Navarro was forced to flee Texas to the United States out of fear of being executed. He would return 3 years later at the age of 21 and would begin to work with empresarios. As a native Texan, he had a vision for the future of Texas, and like many other Tejanos at the time, Navarro came to believe the best hope for Texas lay in Anglo-American colonization, to both combat raiding Native Americans and to bring prosperity and stability to the region. He developed a steady friendship with Stephen F. Austin, and with his skills in Spanish and Mexican law, he helped Austin obtain his contracts to bring settlers to Texas. Navarro later became a land commissioner for the Dewitt colony, and soon after for the Bayard district. In 1825, at the age of 30, he married Margarita de la Grasa, and they raised 7 children. One of them, Jose Angel Navarro III, served 3 terms in the Texas legislature. When the early 1830s rolled around, Navarro was elected to both the Coahuila y Tejas state legislature and to the federal Congress at Mexico City. Navarro championed democratic ideas, and with the help of Austin, they worked to pass legislation that would best benefit the people of Texas. He began to support Texas statehood in Mexico in 1835, and when the Texas Revolution came along, he began to support independence. Navarro would take part in the Convention of 1836, where Texas declared her independence, and he would also sign the document, along with his uncle Jose Francisco Ruiz and Lorenzo de Zavala. He became one of the 3 Mexican signers of the Declaration of Independence, and one of just 2 native-born Tejano signers. Navarro's contemporaries later said that he trembled at the thought of the great step he had taken, but he plunged himself into a leadership role nonetheless, helping to draft the Constitution of the Republic of Texas. As the Texas Revolution continued, Navarro received news from Juan Seguin of the fall of the Alamo. With the death of James Bowie, who was Navarro's nephew by marriage, Navarro had to secure the release of the surviving Navarro family members, Juana Hetrubis Navarro and Maria Hetrubis Navarro, along with a son from Juana's first marriage. They were being held by Mexican soldiers at the McQuees house, where they were moved to the Navarro family home, thereby avoiding humiliation or death from General Santa Anna. When the Texas Revolution came to a close and the era of the Republic of Texas began, Navarro served as Bexar County's representative to the Congress of the Republic of Texas. From the beginning, he saw that Tejanos were becoming the political minority of Texas. Attempting to keep a balance of power, he worked closely with Senator Juan Seguin to promote legislation favorable for the Tejano citizenry. Education was one such priority, and he worked to bring academic institutions to the San Antonio area. Politically, Navarro was a supporter of Mirbo B. Lamar and a critic of Sam Houston, and because of his support of Lamar, he was selected as a commissioner to accompany the Santa Fe expedition in 1841. The expedition was doomed from the start, and they would suffer Native American attacks, hunger, and thirst. When the Texan force got to Santa Fe, they were all arrested and marched to Mexico City, including Navarro as well. While most of the other prisoners were released in 1842 from Perochi prison, Navarro was instead tried and convicted of treason. Expecting to be executed, he finally managed to escape with the help from sympathetic Mexican army officials. When he returned to Texas, he indulged himself into the growing support for U.S. statehood, being a longtime supporter of it. He was the sole Hispanic delegate to the Convention of 1845 and was instrumental in drafting the first state constitution, ensuring future political rights for Tejanos. Navarro served 2 terms in the Texas Senate before retiring from politics in 1849. In his retirement, Navarro wrote several historical and political essays about Texas and San Antonio's role in the Mexican independence movement for the San Antonio Ledger, pointing out that the citizens of Bexar and elsewhere were fighting for Texas freedom 25 years before the Alamo. Interestingly, like a number of other Tejanos, Navarro owned enslaved African Americans. Between 1856 and 1864, he owned between 6 to 9 enslaved people, and census records indicate that as early as 1850, Navarro owned an enslaved 12-year-old boy named Henry. Going back to his days in the legislature of Coahuila y Tejas, Navarro introduced a bill known as the Laws of Contracts, which allowed enslaved people to be brought to Texas as indentured servants, working to pay their debt in labor to their owners. In his later years, Navarro continued to be an outspoken advocate for Tejano rights, condemning Sam Houston for his association with the anti-Catholic Know Nothing Party in the 1850s, and urging Hispanics to defend their heritage inch by inch by participating in the political system. However, to his dismay, he lived to see his people lose most of their land holdings and political influence, who became a working underclass to the Anglo-Americans. He was also equally critical of Houston's pro-union vote in the Kansas-Nebraska issue. He was a strong advocate for states' rights in 1861, and he defended the right of Texas to secede from the Union. Although he was too old to participate in the Civil War, his 4 sons served in the Confederate Army. He was mostly occupied by ranching in his final years, and spent most of each spring, summer, and fall on the 6,000-acre San Geronimo Ranch near Seguin, Texas, about 35 miles east of San Antonio. Navarro later sold his ranch and lived out the rest of his life in San Antonio, where he died at the age of 75 on January 13, 1871. Jose Antonio Navarro was the most influential Tejano in Texas history. He was the earliest pioneer of Texas independence and fought tooth and nail for the freedom of Texas and for the rights of his fellow Tejano citizens, both in the Republic of Texas and the United States, and despite his flaws, he was a Texas patriot till his dying breath.